Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here with us today. My name is Sahil Jain. I'm here with the Newlab team, and today we're going to be talking about the value and purpose of structuring public-private partnerships as a mechanism to accelerate industrial decarbonization, innovation, and economic development. Before we get started, I'll provide a little bit of context on what that very buzzwordy title means, and who I'm joined with on the stage. When we talk about public-private partnerships, what we mean by that are essentially mechanisms where we can leverage public sector, their motivations around driving economic development, growth, and transformation in regions around the world, and how they can collaborate creatively with private sector, specifically around the ways in which we can help accelerate early stage technology development and commercialization. So when we talk about public-private partnerships today, that will be the framing that we use there in light of the reason we've all convened in New York this week. I'd like to introduce who I'm joined with on stage today. I'll start with, on my left directly is Nick Myers, who's the CEO and co-founder of Phoenix Tailings. Next to Nick, we have Cameron Porter, who's a partner at Steel Atlas, a really interesting investment fund. And then lastly, we have Suliman Almazroua, who is the CEO of the National Industrial Development and Logistics Program. So one of the things I wanted to kind of set the stage with is there's a few things that connect all of our panelists here together, and is the reason that we brought everyone here for this conversation. The first is that all of your missions are aligned and tied towards driving industrial growth, decarbonization, and advancement, albeit from slightly different perspectives, where Nick is representing a fast, high-growth startup, Cameron is representing the investor, and Suliman is representing government. All core, I would say, archetypes of stakeholders required for us to kind of advance and meet our goals as it relates to the energy transition. The second thing is that you all have lived experiences around leveraging public-private partnerships and how they can be this vehicle and mechanism to advanced innovation. You've experienced, in some cases, informed and influenced as well, how economic transformation as an imperative can also drive innovation. And lastly, one of the things we'll be talking about today is specifically how different regions around the world have different comparative advantages as it relates to driving this mission. And all of our panelists here specifically have experience developing projects, investing in companies and developing technology, both in the US, as well as in countries such as the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And so we'll be talking a little bit about the different geographic differences, advantages, as it relates to these types of partnership structures. So, getting into it, with that context in mind, I'm going to start maybe with a question to Cameron. I am such a big fan of what you and your partners are building at Steel Atlas and the support you provide companies. I read your blog posts very regularly, and there was something that stood out to me that I wanted to share with the audience as framing. Public-private partnerships, like those occurring across sectors in Saudi, have the capacity to eliminate barriers associated with investing in businesses that require heavier capex and the construction of first-of-a-kind facilities. Can you talk a little bit about what that means, and specifically tell us about your investment thesis and how you're leveraging the generational opportunity in the kingdom as it relates to supporting and creating value for your portfolio companies?
It's a very easy question, so it'll only take 2 seconds. But thank you for having me, Sahil, and it's wonderful to be up here with the other panelists. Talal and I, we run a venture capital fund called Steel Atlas, where we invest in industrial technologies through the lens of resilience and volatility. So we look at where volatility is occurring in things like baseload power prices, critical mineral prices, freight prices, so on and so forth. And then we try to find those technologies positioned to mitigate those sources of volatility. When we're doing that, one of the core challenges you face is that often these technologies involve hard assets. And hard assets are oftentimes not best financed with venture capital dollars. So the question is, where can you go find public sector support to make building these assets easier? And I think there's kind of three things we look for from a public sector, whether it's here in the US or in Saudi Arabia, that we think will lead to outsized outcomes. Number one is capital. Do they have the dollars to deploy? Number two is coordination. Do they have a mechanism in place where they're aligned and there's a clear direction that they're going? And number three is constraints. Are they actually facing real challenges in the areas you're looking to deploy in? And I think what makes us excited about the opportunity in Saudi Arabia is they check all three of these boxes. They have the capital, they have the coordination in the form of Vision 2030, and they face real constraints as it relates to decarbonization and the environment. It is hotter in Saudi than it is here. They have no freshwater river. In fact, it's the largest country in the world that faces that constraint. And they also have natural resources that they're not hoping only to extract, but also refine and move up the value chain so they don't end up like a country like the DRC in other categories. So when we look at kind of the work we do and the companies we work with, we're seeing it kind of across the technology stack, opportunities to partner with countries like Saudi Arabia to move these companies forward. In fact, and maybe we can touch on it later, if people were here for the talk with Jennifer on the nuclear fuel cycle, one of the companies we've done the most work on is in the nuclear fuel cycle space, including like the greenfield opportunity to deploy a non-proliferant system there. And this is stuff that only happens because Saudi is pushing into and diversifying into sectors that they've never been in before. So there's real incentive to bring new players into the fold.
Maybe as a follow-up, Suliman and Nick, I think question I have for you guys is, what have been, you know, in your past experiences with these types of initiatives and collaborations, what have been both the advantages that, you know, Cameron has started to talk about, what have been some of the challenges as well? And as we think about structuring new types of platforms that can drive innovation and technology development and economic transformation, what has to be true as a part of these types of partnerships and collaborations? From your perspective as a startup, what's helpful? And Suliman, as you think about this from a government perspective, where do you want to see things being done differently than they have in the past?
So, Nick Myers, co-founder and CEO at Phoenix Tailings. We have a novel technology called predictive compensation that allows us to be able to harvest new materials. We focus on the chemistry underlying a system. So not only do we focus on tailings and the extraction of primary, critical materials like rare earth metals, nickel, copper, cobalt, but we primarily focus on the processing of those rare earth concentrates to the final metal alloys. And as it sits today, Phoenix Tailings is the largest rare earth metal producer in the entire Western Hemisphere. We've done a lot of work with various different government agencies around the world. And the common trend, I would say, that's challenging is speed. As a startup, for those of you that are startups here, I think you very clearly understand this challenge of runway. The best case scenario, right, you're as a startup, you're sitting there with 18 to 24 months of runway. That is the best situation just after you raise your round. Most of the time, you're sitting there looking at a 6-month runway, wondering about your next capital raise. And you're trying to think about, hey, how can I actually go and deploy something of real substance? That's challenging, right? And so when we talk about going to the kingdom and taking American technology, which is some of the best in the world, right, and deploying it in an amazing ecosystem that has all the support, it is a great opportunity, but it's always tough for us to identify how we're gonna actually allocate the time. Because at the end of the day, yes, this may yield billions of dollars in returns for us, for the kingdom, for the whole ecosystem. But I'm sitting there looking like, okay, well, if I don't raise $1 million, I'm out of business in a month. That's challenging, right? And I'm certain everyone here who's been in the startup ecosystem has known that feeling. It's tough, right? So I think there's a huge opportunity with groups like the Kingdom, and I think that's one of the biggest things that attracted me to the sector. And when we were at the FFF in January, why I was so excited, I see the Kingdom actually moving fast, not just talking about it. I've been all around the world in various different countries, and many people talk about bringing companies like this to those ecosystems because mining is so tied to the national security of whichever country, whether it be the US, Canada, Australia, or the Kingdom. But I did notice that the Kingdom was actually moving fast. Not just talking about, oh, strategically, what would we do? How do we hire McKinsey to come up with this new model? It's how do we actually make this real? Let's build a pilot in the next 9 months, 6 months, ideally 2 or 3 if we can make it happen. So I was very impressed with that, and I think that's something that we need to push further on and keep going, and congratulations to the team pushing on that so far.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I will not be able to present the case as he presented. I think that's coming from you is more credible than coming from me as a Saudi. But I think everybody in this room knows that Saudi relies on fossil fuel is unsustainable for thousands of economic and environmental reasons. As you might say it here in Brooklyn, forget about it. But in all seriousness, let me tell you how this all started. We had almost every top leader in Saudi getting all in one conference room. Very huge conference room in one of the hotels with the Royal Highness, the Crown Prince. And he asked everyone one question: what do you need to be the best version of you and your organization? And we ran for more than 1 year and a half trying to figure out how to do that. And we end up thinking that even with the best version that we put together is not enough for Saudi to be at where it wants to be. So we changed the model to add some top-bottom approach. What is the national agenda that can contribute to the Saudi and to the international community in the same time? Then we came up with this blueprint called Vision 2030. Anybody haven't heard of Vision 2030? Please raise hands. Saudi Vision 2030? Oh, please count them, Sahil. We need to take them to Saudi. But literally, that's the plan. It's a blueprint for the nation, started in 2016 and happening for the coming 6 years to 2030. And it addresses all sides of our lives. It's reshape of our economy and social. We're talking about quality of life, entertainment, economy diversification, human development, every aspect of our lives in that blueprint. And that makes it easier to every partner in the world because we have a common goal that everybody would like to share. We are having the same values that everyone has. We want to have renewable energy and moving from fossil fuels. We are trying our best to contribute to the human development. And this is where my organization comes to be, National Industrial Development and Logistics Program. We are one of the vision programs that's focused on the economic diversification. And this is, we aim to transform the kingdom to an industrial powerhouse and a global logistic hub and amplify the value of our national resources. That's our aim. But I think there is something that we discovered across the years since we started the Vision 2030. It's actually the genius of integrating these four sectors together: mining, industry, logistics, and energy. Eliminating silos is a key to achieving results, whether in the government or with the private sector or with NGOs. Just eliminating silos has a key value that we never thought we will achieve. And to be honest, that's one of the genius of His Royal Highness, because today we are hearing about supply chain interruptions. We are seeing the companies moving where the resources are and close to the customers for customizing products. This is his idea 10 years ago when we established NIDLP as an integrated platform to actually be able to bridge that to the world. Now we have a constructive value to the international community. We are starting the National Geological Survey, which availing all the critical mineral required for the renewable energy, for the digitization, and for others. We are building the largest green hydrogen plant. We are building maybe the only city that's zero carbon, zero waste, NEOM. And for startups, for founders who would like to test these things, I think these are the platform available to have this technology available. That's maybe my shorter answer.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more in the fact that the coordination, as Nick and Suliman have referenced, as as a mechanism to remove friction for companies to enter into a new market and to realize its potential is incredibly important. But I think what's amazing, Suliman, about your program is you have thought through the dependencies across a value chain that's required for these industrial technologies. So when Nick builds Phoenix Tailings plant in the kingdom, there's a well thought out mechanism around the importance that logistics will play upstream and downstream of the feedstock and the metals you refine. You'll think about the renewable energy that's required to drive the whole life cycle emissions down. And obviously you're thinking about the downstream market creation of the rare earth elements into magnets that will then go into all sorts of different renewable technologies. So I think the value chain based approach is also a really kind of beautiful way in which, again, the public-private partnership as a vehicle can help drive technology from the lab and scale to the market. So, Suliman, I'm going to continue on your thread a little bit. You spoke a bit about the mandate of NIDLP. Can you maybe talk, I'd love to hear the origin story of how NIDLP formed, and then as you are thinking about your organization, not only in the past, but looking forward, what have been the types of multilateral partnerships and collaborations that you've formed over the last few years? What are you looking to achieve as an organization to enable the goals of Vision 2030?
So again, I think I told the story about the vision creation, but NIDLP is one of these ideas that we knew that if the industry minister go in silos and transportation minister goes in their silos, we will not achieve the constructive value that we need for the investors, because no matter what your factory is, you need to have that access to the port for export, you have to have access to the R&D facility, you have to have access to the right workforce, the educated workforce that's needed for your factory. You have to have the ease of doing business in Saudi working better. So the normal way of doing this as a government where everyone has his own function will not work for us. So we established this idea of NIDLP that was created in 2018 as a follow-up to Vision 2030. And we started to actually lay out all the requirements. And we think like an investor. We being investor-centric. What would investor needs to have a successful journey in Saudi? So we built all the initiatives, all the enablers accordingly. And today, we start having this on a cluster level. Let me give you an example. The Lucid motors. Arguably one of the most advanced EVs in the world. No offense to Tesla fans, but we are so proud that they have selected Saudi for their second manufacturing facility. But what we are more proud of that integration that we build, of the ecosystem that produce the right business environment for Lucid, Hyundai, Seer, and Pirelli tires, and most of the automotive factories to come to this automotive cluster and grow and thrive. That's to me the value that we created. We make sure that they have the right access to the world-class ports, King Abdullah ports. We made sure that they have access to the highest R&D facility, King Abdullah University. We made sure that their executives and workers have access to the quality of life, the King Abdullah City, where largest golf and other places there. And we make sure beautiful beach on the Red Sea. And we make sure that they have access to the educated workforce, a new academy of for automotive industry on their neighborhood, just to make sure that we produce the right workforce. And also we have this special economic zone criteria that made the taxing regime, all that business environment is easy for them to export and thrive. So that the ecosystem, this is what NIDLP actually does in basic. We make sure that we make that big picture integration to a cluster level and apply it for our investors.
Thank you so much. Maybe as a follow-up, Cameron, I'd love to hear from you because you have both a deep understanding of the ecosystem here and are supporting companies with scale-up opportunities in the kingdom. How could you describe a bit of like the bidirectionality that we can create between these regions? You know, like how do we leverage, you described some of the comparative advantages of the kingdom as it relates to the cost of capital, the greenfield nature, and the environmental constraints that can stress technology in a way that maybe is ahead of the environmental constraints that other countries will face. I am fascinated by this idea of like building blueprints for these technologies in a place that is not encumbered by these legacy things in a country such as Saudi. What can we be doing more of to allow for more information sharing, allowing companies to kind of see this bidirectional opportunity to then come back to the US or into other developed markets to scale?
Yeah, I think to answer this question, let me dive into just a very tangible example of where we've been working on this with one of our companies. And it actually ties, I think, all the pieces of the value chain that's at this podium and here together. So we work with a company in Switzerland called Transmutex, and they're developing a new type of nuclear fuel cycle. And it's a non-proliferant fuel cycle, so you can't make a weapon out of it. Saudi today doesn't have nuclear reactors. They have other kind of clean energy strategies that they're pursuing alongside oil and gas in order to create a clean grid by 2060. But because of this constraint and the amount of clean water they need, nuclear would be a great solution because it's reliable baseload power. Now, there's countries like the US, which theoretically would be a great proponent of these types of technologies. But the truth is we already have a nuclear fuel cycle here based around enriched uranium, which, if we remember from the last year, is what we were buying from Russia. When we go to a country like Saudi and we build on top of efforts like NIDLPs, who start to understand what types of minerals are there, namely thorium, you can start to see, wait, I think there's an option to create a new type of nuclear fuel cycle. And then you start coordinating with the government agencies and the federal research labs. We do a lot of work with and conversations with KCARE, another example of a high-level research organization. And we work with them to say, I think there's an opportunity here for you to take a step forward and start to lead the world in one of these technology domains. Outside of just resource extraction and energy production, you're moving up the value chain where you start to invest in these technologies, you localize them, you develop first-of-a-kind facilities, and then you become an exporter of not just goods, but real technologies and designs to the rest of the world. And so we're hoping to do that in more categories. And that's why it's awesome to come to Newlab. It's awesome to see people like Phoenix Tailings, because the companies here are creating the value-added technology so that you can take resources along with the logistics and you can create something that a country can really build an industry around. And so that's the exciting opportunity, and I encourage all the startups that are here to have these conversations and try to get the information from folks like myself and others who are involved in these things to understand where those opportunities are, because if you can get access to the information in these people, it can move fast. Like as an investor, there's basically 3 criteria for me. It's does it matter, does it work, and can they move fast? And the can they move fast problem for a lot of hard tech companies is being solved by people on this stage.
Thank you so much. Nick, I have always been a fan of what you're building, but I think, you know, beyond the technology, thinking about how to commercialize and go to market is obviously something that's really difficult in the hard tech and deep tech space. I would love it if you could share a little bit about the really, what I think is in some ways a first-of-a-kind deal structure that you were able to develop here in the state of New York as it related to helping scale your technology. If you could talk a little bit about that deal structure and how, more than the structure, I think it's how that helped you on your journey as you were scaling up the technology.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I mentioned before, right, Phoenix Tailings processes tailings, which is a waste product from mining. Right? We operate in the mining sector, one of the worst, notoriously the terrible industry to operate with technology, like terrible. There's no clear path to commercialization, right? They operate in all these different countries that don't have any type of restrictions around how to take IP or how to manage it, right? So it's been historically a problem. So we met Sahil, I don't know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I don't know, a while, when we were in a backyard and we had literally like a cooler full of our reactor that was on a porch. So it's grown if anyone's curious. But we were funded by the NSF and some later RPE and a few other folks, but it started off really doing customer discovery stuff. They have a whole process where we did 267 customer interviews, flying all around the world to interview people and understand, hey, how do you do a business deal here? And we learned a lot about how mining works. We learned a lot about how government works. We learned a lot about these ecosystems. So when we were saying, okay, well, now we're at a point where we need an asset to actually scale up on, we do work with mining companies collectively today, and they're very, very helpful. We found good paths to deployment, but it wasn't until we really found this asset in upstate New York or Barton Hill and in the Essex County region, over in the Adirondacks, beautiful place if anyone's ever curious, where they have this giant pile of 3 million tons of iron ore tailings. The story they sold me on is that they originally harvested the iron back in the 60s that was used in the Apollo space missions. Hard to verify, but it was cool, and it's a really great story for investors. So we loved it. It was a really great opportunity, and my chief of staff, Patrick Portman, who was one of the top folks at Jetty Resources, and my co-founder, Anthony Baladin, really built a really long-standing relationship with the county, understood their problems at an authentic level, not just like, oh, you have mud, give me mud. Like, it's not really how it works. Like, understanding, hey, what are the critical issues that are facing this ecosystem, right? This pile of dirt is a blight on the ecosystem, right? It's this giant sludge pit that sits there. And yeah, they use a little bit for road base, a little bit for cement, but they want to see the initiative of, hey, we can use this to revitalize this county, revitalize this community, and build an ecosystem, creating critical metals that will fuel the next wind turbine, electric vehicle, missile system, defense applications, right? Because rare earths are absolutely critical to all of that, and 99% come from Russia and China. So if we can build that story arc in upstate New York, bringing hundreds of jobs to the ecosystem, that's a huge win. And so we established this option agreement with the county to basically have the rights to harvest that asset and take the time to actually evaluate it with all the optionality, right? So, which is key for us, right? I can't just pump in $14 million to buy an asset, which if you go to many mining operations, that's what they will ask you for. Dude, I've raised like 32 million in my entire life cycle of the company, right? I can't just pump that out, right? So it's challenging. So this is a really good optionality where we have that ability to, as we scale up and we have the initiatives, we do the evaluation on the ore body, we share all the data with the county to make sure they can use it in the future, but making sure that we can actually go and deploy here. And then we also use that, of course, when we looked and we talked to the end OEMs, because we have to go and sell metal, right? Bear in mind, for those of you that may know mining, right? You don't go and dig up a rare earth metal, that you dig up a rock. And I don't know if you know much about building an F-35 or a wind turbine, but they don't use rocks. So you have to process that rock into the metal. So that's a lot of what we do. And we process that rock, ship it to Boston, where we do our processing facility today, and turn that to the metal, which goes into the OEM that makes a automotive component. So we use that site, and they came and visited. We tour them around. We show them the opportunity about, hey, this is where your future vehicle will actually be getting the resource from. And that is a huge selling point and really allowed us to close my big announcement, $200 million sales contract recently, which we're pretty excited about. Thank you.
Congratulations. I guess another follow-up for you, maybe Nick, and to the rest of the panel as well, I guess. What aspect of this collaboration that you formed with the county is, in your mind, extensible or has been extensible in other deals that you've done in the future? I mean, how have you thought about this type of, like you said, local community, the workforce development opportunity, the economic growth opportunity? How has that factored into projects you choose to focus on and focus your team's time on?
A lot of it's the phase gating, right? So when you invest in an asset, right, and whether or not we're putting $14 million down or we're spending our time and effort there, right, it is an Oh, Satish. So it is an investment, right? And we have limited resources, so we have to be very careful about how much we invest, right, at a given time. So a lot of it, we have to spend a ton of time evaluating these assets, understanding the in-depth, and we do spend a lot of resources and time and effort and money to actually do that. And so whenever we're looking at doing a deal with, say, a Saudi Arabian ecosystem or something in Brazil or Australia, right? We have to make sure that that project is going systematically forward where we can de-risk it step by step by step. And as it gets less and less de-risked, we can invest more and more time, resources, money, et cetera, right? And building that relationship with the county allowed us to be able to do that in an effective manner. And by doing that, that allows us to give us the full understanding about, hey, what is the actual impact here to the environment? What actually here is the impact to the job creation? And how do we actually scale that, right? And that's what we take really to every kind of contract that we're looking to build, whether it's with the county or candidly, even directly with the mining companies. It's been very, very helpful, and I think it's a method that I would tell everyone that you guys should look to follow, especially in doing deals in this sector where it does take a lot of capital resources to actually be able to be successful.
And just, I think that's great advice because it also goes across industries, and I also think it's part of the reason why Newlab has the success it's had is that whatever type of technology company you're looking at here, they're looking to work with larger players in the government. And this type of phase gating and information exchanges allows for the intermented buildup of trust and risk-taking that both companies need, not only to make decisions, but for investors like myself to get comfortable deploying more capital into them. And this is a universal truth, and it's not just limited to mining.
I totally agree. I think Reagan once said, the business of the government is to stay out of business. But to be honest, any new business environment need to be developed very well by the government so business feel confident to get into it. So the jump start of that business on any market need to be at first established by a good enablers by the government to de-risk the business because, again, putting their own money, they need to make sure that it's as de-risked as possible. So I think this is kind of not following Reagan's advice, but specifically to the new businesses. But once you have the right policy, the right business environment, then I don't think the government should be interfering with the business anymore. But in general, this is what we do in Saudi. We make sure that we put the right policies, the right enablers, then we step back and let the business run its dynamics of supply and demand and market dynamics.
I think it's also just worth noting that the reason the US in the past has been a dominant industrial player is because we had an aggressive industrial policy. During World War II, Japan basically cut off all of our supply of rubber, all of Southeast Asia. That's where we got all the rubber in the Western world. Within 2 years, the US government pushed industrial policy to figure out how do we make synthetic rubber locally. And after a year of that work, they were producing more rubber globally than what we got naturally from Southeast Asia. And so I think there's these specific moments where economies need to go through a phase change, where government coordination can jumpstart the opportunity for the free market to move from there. And I think this is exactly what NIDLP is doing, is they are providing that jumpstart, and then you want the free market mechanism to pull people to induce investment, foreign direct investment in some cases, and that's what I think is happening today.
So just to jump in there too, because we do a fair bit in this sector on pushing things forward. And in the United States, I think that we still do have a very good industrial partnership with the government, and there is a lot of initiatives here to push things forward. The one shift, especially when it comes to critical minerals, that I think the kingdom does actually pretty well, but the US needs to catch up, I'll be very straightforward, is technology. If you take the Chinese tech, if you take the Russian technology and try to implement it here in the United States, you're gonna be killing people on a daily basis. Because this technology is brutal, it's rough, it's not built for the westernized world, right? So I would say it's not just a matter of pushing government to say, hey, let's do another DPA Title III cash out where we do throw, what is it, $65 million towards a mining operation that's using Chinese technology, or an Australian ecosystem that's trying to put it in here in the United States, right? That's not the answer, right? What does the United States do best in the world? And that is build awesome tech. And so we need to push on that heavily and then partner with groups like the Kingdom and be able to deploy that all around the world and use that technology to authentically clean up the planet and make everyone's lives better. And in critical minerals, we have authentically that real opportunity.
Big +1.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I have one last question. I think maybe I've surpassed the time allowed, but I guess I'll just continue on that trend. So my last question for each of you is, fast forward a year from now, we're on this stage, maybe in Riyadh, maybe somewhere else, but a year from now, tell us about maybe what is one achievement that you want to be able to represent from your organization as it relates to the conversations that we had today, and you know, what role will very creative, one-of-a-kind partnership structures play a hand in those achievements. But Suliman, I'll start with you.
Yeah, first, I like that. I hope I see every one of you in Riyadh next year. You will have great fun, I assure you. But you know, I want to emphasize that Vision 2030 is not a government initiative. It's a national movement and international call for all the same challenges that international have. So, and Newlab specifically partner with Saudi in solving some of these challenges that internationally we go through. The new climate's challenges, renewables, the future of mobilities. All these aspects we are working now with the Newlab, establishing their regional office in Saudi to start these studios of solving these challenges for Saudi and for the international community. And of course, founders, amazing founders such as you are welcome to join us in these challenges and solving them. We will have great support from the government. We have great support from our industrial partners. And we have the know-how that's been deployed all over the US to be part of this great movement that we do. So yeah, I extend the same invitation that Sahil did, but to the whole audience, of course, to join us in Saudi. And we will be celebrating with, I think, a place as awesome as this in Riyadh very soon.
Yeah, I'll just give a very specific one. We invest in a variety of industrial technologies. Every single one of them uses critical minerals. Every single one of them deals with the issue of buying those minerals from Russia and China. I hope that there's places that can do this cleanly, and I hope that Saudi can be one of them. I hope the US can be one of them. And I hope that some of those facilities get built, these technology companies' facilities get built in places like the Kingdom, because you do get access to a different type of global market there. It really is like the meeting place for the world, and hopefully a year from now, we'll have some of the work we're doing that can be more formally announced.
That's good. So we get asked a lot why we do startups. I think people here all will resonate with this, about why we work for 2 years for no money. And now we get a little money. But it really, for me personally, it boils down to the people. I want to make a deep, fundamental impact across the planet on people's lives. And it breaks my heart to see what they're doing in Russia and China today with how we actually produce these raw materials. It doesn't come out here. We don't see it all the time. For those in the sector, we know it. It's always been a dirty secret, but it's horrible. So what I want to do in the next year is make a fundamental change and actually demonstrate to the planet that we can do this at a large commercial scale, cleanly, profitably, and scalably in the US, having pathways to the Kingdom, having pathways to Australia, Europe, all around the world. Not just rare earths, but I want to make sure it's seen across the world for rare earth metals, nickel, copper, cobalt, palladium, gold, all the other metals that we see and need every single day for everything we see we can use on a daily basis. Because the way it's working today is horrible, and we have to fix that.
Thank you so much to Suliman, Cameron, and Nick for being a part of this really important discussion. Very fortunate to be here on the stage with you all, and looking forward to working together in the future as well. Thanks so much, everyone.